What would you do if, while navigating a dark, deserted highway, you suddenly spotted a woman dressed in white, standing motionless on the shoulder? Would you stop, or would you proceed and feign ignorance? But what if, mere hours later, your daughter awoke from a coma, recounting the exact same woman standing by her hospital bedside? This isn't a tale of the supernatural. It transcends the narrative of a lone truck driver. It delves into the profound implications of clinging to faith when it's your sole remaining anchor. On a hushed winter evening in Mississippi, the asphalt ribbon of the highway unfurled like dormant veins beneath the moon's glow. A solitary 18-wheeler traversed Route 82, its powerful headlights cleaving the nascent fog as it ascended into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Behind the wheel was Michael Thompson, a man of 44 years, his countenance etched by the passage of time and countless miles on the road, his spirit fractured by a sorrow no parent should ever bear. His presence on the road that particular night was unplanned. His daughter, Emily, a mere 9 years of age, had been in a comatose state for 6 consecutive days. Medical professionals in Jackson found no discernible cause, no head trauma, no seizure activity, simply a collapse at home from which she never stirred. His late wife, who had departed this world 3 years prior, had been the family's pillar of prayer. Michael, however, hadn't set foot in a church for over a decade. Life had stripped him of his spiritual connection, eroding his prayer, his hope, his very belief. Yet the demands of life, the mounting bills, do not pause for divine intervention. Consequently, when his dispatcher issued an ultimatum, accept an urgent delivery to Atlanta or face termination, Michael acquiesced. It wasn't a choice born of desire, but of necessity. The heating in their home had been disconnected, and the accumulating medical expenses for his daughter had reached a figure too staggering to articulate aloud. The cab of his truck was frigid, despite the heater's efforts. Affixed to the dashboard was a worn photograph of Emily, her small arms encircling his neck, a vibrant crayon drawing behind her, bearing the purple inscription, "Love you forever, Daddy." For the initial 2 hours of his journey, Michael drove in an unnerving silence. No music played, no radio chatter filled the air, no cellular signal reached him, only the steady drone of the engine and the deafening roar of his own regret, a sound far more potent than any motor. As the highway wound its way into the mountainous terrain, Michael began to whisper, the words a nebulous blend of supplication and contemplation, adrift in the encroaching night. "If you're out there," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "If you're still listening, I'm not asking for a sign. Just don't take her from me. That's all I ask." Unbeknownst to him, his plea was already being heard by someone, or perhaps something. What transpired next would irrevocably alter his perception of divinity, miracles, and the enduring strength of a mother's legacy. Before the desolate road, before the suffocating silence, before the spectral apparition on the roadside, there was a man quietly, agonizingly, disintegrating in plain view. Michael Thompson had not always harbored such profound doubt within his soul. There was a time, not so long ago, when his mornings commenced with prayer and his evenings concluded with the gentle strains of hymns sung by a soft voice emanating from the kitchen. He and his wife, Rachel, resided in a modest dwelling on the outskirts of Natchez, Mississippi. It was a humble abode, yet it radiated warmth and resounded with laughter. Crayons adorned their walls, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked cornbread perfumed their Sundays. Michael had been raised within the Catholic tradition. Every Sunday, his mother would meticulously press his shirt to a crisp white perfection and escort him down the gravel lane to St. Gabriel's Parish. He had served as an altar boy, intimately familiar with the lyrics of every hymn. For a period, his faith was unshakable. However, life possesses a peculiar way of challenging the very foundations of our certainty. The gradual erosion of Michael's faith began with Rachel's illness. Initially, it manifested as mere fatigue and a persistent cough. Soon, however, a devastating diagnosis followed: advanced breast cancer. The disease progressed with alarming rapidity, outpacing their comprehension and exceeding the reach of their faith. Michael's initial response was prayer, earnest and desperate, akin to a child imploring a father not to leave. He lit candles, recited scriptures, and knelt by her bedside each night. His requests evolved from entreaties to pleas, culminating in whispered shouts into the void when it seemed no one was listening. "Why her?" he cried out. Rachel, in contrast, met her affliction with unwavering grace. She maintained her radiant smile even as her physical strength waned. In her final moments, she clasped Michael's hand and offered a single, poignant piece of advice. "Whatever happens next, don't stop believing. Emily needs your faith more than anything." Yet when Rachel peacefully passed in her sleep, a profound silence descended upon Michael. He ceased attending church, carefully stored away her Bible, and replaced the bedtime hymns he sang to Emily with tales of trucks, highways, and anything that served to distance him from his profound sense of loss. His prayers dwindled, his heart grew cold, and Sunday mornings became opportunities for extra shifts to cover the mortgage payments. The overwhelming guilt of witnessing the woman he adored succumb to illness while divine intervention seemed absent, erected an insurmountable barrier within his soul, one that no clergyman could breach. Despite his spiritual desolation, Emily's faith remained undimmed. Even at the tender age of 6, she insisted on lighting a candle for her mother's birthday. Clinging to his hand, she would whisper, "Mom's still with us, Daddy. I can feel her." Michael would offer a faint smile, nod, and discreetly turn away to conceal the welling tears. It was Emily who rehung the cross on the wall after he had removed it. Emily who placed her mother's rosary in the glove compartment of his truck, stating, "So Mommy goes with you too." And it was Emily, in her innocent wisdom, who continued to tend the flame that Michael no longer had the courage to touch. Then came the abrupt decline. Merely 2 weeks prior, on an ordinary afternoon, Emily was engrossed in coloring in the living room while Michael attended to the dishes. He heard a soft thud, barely audible above the refrigerator's hum. Turning, he found her on the floor, eyes closed, her breath stilled, no warning, no apparent injury, simply gone. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes, but those minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity, played out in agonizing slow motion. He rode in the back of the ambulance, clutching her small hand, whispering her name as if it held an incantation. "Emily, Emily baby, please, please." At St. Luke's Medical Center, she was stabilized and connected to various machines. Physicians conducted a battery of tests, including neurological scans, blood work, and toxicology screenings. All results returned inconclusive. There was no discernible explanation, no sign of trauma, no precipitating event for her comatose state. Simply a young girl lost in an inexplicable slumber. Michael remained steadfastly by her side for the initial 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, however, the hospital staff gently urged him to seek rest. He returned home, sank into the driver's seat of his truck, and wept uncontrollably into the steering wheel. He felt utterly lost, unsure of how to proceed or whom to confide in, as the only person he had ever truly trusted with his pain now rested beneath a marble cross. That same evening, the dispatch call arrived, an urgent assignment to Atlanta. He had no desire to accept, but the threat of dismissal loomed if he refused. Without that paycheck, he couldn't afford the oxygen tank Emily would require starting that Monday. With a heavy heart, he kissed her forehead goodbye, whispered, "I'll be back soon," and drove away, alone, filled with a bitter anger and an aching void. Michael was no longer merely pursuing a paycheck. He was fleeing from the suffocating silence, harboring a desperate hope for a celestial response. The mountain passes of the Appalachians offer no room for error. Narrow shoulders, treacherous turns, and blind corners demand absolute precision. A single misjudgment results in irreversible consequences, especially under the cloak of night. It was nearly 3 in the morning when Michael Thompson's rig navigated its way to higher altitudes near the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. The air grew thinner, the temperature plummeted, and the trees loomed closer, a dense, oppressive presence. The radio was inoperative, and any cellular signal had vanished miles prior. It was an isolation of man, machine, and mountain. Outside, a dense fog began to descend, shrouding the asphalt like a spectral garment, rendering the headlights' beams increasingly ineffective. The resonant rumble of the engine reverberated off the rocky inclines, but within the cab, a different, more profound silence prevailed. A heavy, agonizing stillness. Michael had remained wordless for over an hour, neither to himself nor to any divine entity. What remained to be said? Emily was still unconscious, her very breath dependent on machines, her heartbeat regulated by wires, and he wasn't even present for her. He was transporting furniture to an insignificant warehouse in Atlanta for a paycheck that would scarcely cover her mounting medical expenses. Michael's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Beneath the surface of his weary eyes, grief began to resurface. Then he saw it. Approaching rapidly was a notorious curve in the road, known among truckers as Dead Man's Loop, a perilous switchback carved precariously along the precipice of a sheer drop. Michael carefully downshifted. He was familiar with this stretch of road, aware of its capacity to swallow vehicles whole. However, on this particular night, an unsettling difference permeated the atmosphere. There was no wind, no sound, no rustling in the trees. The mountain itself seemed to have fallen into a profound stillness. He passed a mile marker, mile 107. It was then that a profound memory surfaced. Not a conscious thought, but an innate recollection. His mother's voice, soft and steeped in a southern cadence, steady as a gospel hymn, echoed in his mind. When you're scared, baby, when the world goes quiet, that's when God listens loudest. Michael swallowed hard. The road curved again, then again, and just before the subsequent bend, his lips moved almost imperceptibly. He wasn't consciously directing the words, but they emerged raw, fractured, and entirely unscripted. God, he began, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if you remember me. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. The steering wheel trembled in his grasp, or perhaps it was his arms. He kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, but his voice lowered, approaching something akin to a prayer. I haven't asked you for anything in a long time. Maybe because I stopped believing you answer. Maybe because I don't deserve an answer anymore. His voice faltered, cracking with emotion. But if you're still there, if you ever were, please, don't take my little girl. The rig continued its onward journey. There was no divine flash of light, no celestial thunderclap, no ethereal vision in the heavens, only the pervasive fog, the endless road, and the persistent hum of the diesel engine. Yet something fundamental had shifted within the confines of the cab. It wasn't a sense of peace, nor was it comfort that settled upon him. It was a profound surrender. Michael was unaware, but this marked his first direct address to the Almighty in over 8 years, not since the somber occasion of the funeral, not since Rachel's hands had grown still in his. His plea lacked eloquence. It was even incomplete, but it was undeniably real, and somewhere, perhaps on that very mountain, or perhaps in a realm far beyond it, his words were heard. The truck ascended into the next bend. The silence persisted, but now it felt imbued with a sense of attentive listening. The clock on the dashboard flickered. 3:07 a.m. The world outside seemed to have become hollowed out. The fog pressed in relentlessly from every direction, transforming the mountain road into an ethereal, spectral passage. Every bend seemed identical to the last, and each creeping shadow carried the same haunting message. Press onward, or retreat. Michael's eyelids felt heavy, his body operating on pure reflex, while his spirit still vibrated with the raw plea he had just uttered. Please, don't take my little girl. His voice had been swallowed by the frigid night air, met with silence, but an answer was imminent. As his truck navigated a blind turn, the powerful beams sliced across a slender strip of gravel bordering the roadway. It was merely the edge of the asphalt before a precipitous drop, unremarkable except for the solitary figure standing there this time. Michael's pulse quickened, his foot instinctively jamming the brake pedal. The heavy vehicle shuddered, its tires emitting a soft whisper on the moist asphalt, the trailer groaning its protest as the speed diminished to a crawl. The headlights stabilized, and there she was, a woman, utterly still, her gaze fixed. She was clad in a long, pristine white gown, which flowed gracefully, untouched by the surrounding dampness or mist. A veil cascaded over her head, stirring subtly in the breeze but never revealing her face. Her features appeared delicate, fair, almost radiant in the glare of the truck's lamps. Her hands were clasped at her waist, and her eyes, even from the driver's cab, conveyed a profound depth. They held no menace, no accusation, only an unnerving awareness, as if she perceived not only the man at the wheel, but the entirety of his inner world. He blinked, once, then twice. She remained unmoving. A mix of apprehension and a deeper, almost sacred reverence propelled Michael towards the door. It was a moment of profound recognition, akin to a child encountering something truly divine for the first time. He alighted from the cab, his boots crunching on the loose stones. The mountain air was sharp and invigorating against his skin. Yet the woman persisted in her silent vigil. She was no figment of his imagination, no optical illusion. 10 paces separated him from her, bringing him close enough to discern her face with clarity. She seemed neither young nor old, her countenance possessing a timeless, gentle quality. Her eyes held a profound understanding of sorrow, a capacity to bear it without succumbing, the kind of depth only a mother could possess. Michael cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began, do you need something?" She offered no verbal response, no smile, no nod, yet her gaze penetrated his very being. Then, with a fluid grace that seemed as natural as breathing, she stepped forward. Her bare feet made no sound upon the gravel, her dress remained silent, her veil undisturbed. Yet the world, in some ineffable way, shifted. She glided past him, moving towards the passenger side of his truck. Without preamble, without hesitation, she opened the door and settled inside. Michael turned, his expression one of utter bewilderment. She sat there composedly, her hands still folded, her gaze fixed forward, as if this was an act she had performed countless times, as if she inherently belonged there. For a few suspended moments, the world seemed to cease its rotation. The engine's hum, the wind's whisper, even the sound of breathing vanished. Michael re-entered the driver's seat, his hands trembling. Neither spoke. A palpable holiness had permeated the cab, transcending the realm of ghosts, strangers, or mere visions. Though the full realization would dawn upon him much later, Michael Thompson had just welcomed the Celestial Mother into his truck and consequently into his fractured existence. The cab held a profound quietude, the engine's low idle a mere murmur against the night's soft pressure at the windows. The woman in white occupied the passenger seat with an enduring composure, her hands resting serenely in her lap, her gaze steady, neither engaging nor evading Michael, simply existing. Michael's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, it feeling like the sole tangible anchor in a disorienting reality. He dared not utter a word, dared not move. His heart hammered with a rhythm that seemed to fill the void between them. Who was she? Why was she here? And, most puzzlingly, why did he feel no fear? He stole a sideways glance, conscious of not staring. Her skin emitted a faint luminescence in the dim cabin light, too ethereal for humanity, yet disconcertingly familiar for a stranger. Her veil shimmered as if woven from moonlight. Her very presence imbued the truck with an indescribable quality. Peace, certainly, but also an overwhelming sense of awe, as if standing on the precipice of a miracle. Still, she remained silent. Michael moistened his lips. Do you require assistance? Are you injured?" Her response was non-existent. She didn't even blink. Then, without turning her head, without altering her tone, a voice emerged, not from her lips, but from a deeper, more eternal source. "Do not be afraid," the voice resonated. "Your daughter will awaken." The words didn't reverberate. They neither rattled the glass nor shook the earth, yet they stole his breath. Michael's foot involuntarily eased off the accelerator, causing the truck to lurch precariously towards the shoulder before he regained control. He slammed the brakes, bringing the rig to an abrupt halt on the narrow mountain road. He now fixed his gaze upon her, openly, desperately. "What did you just say?" She offered no reply. It was unnecessary. The message had already embedded itself deep within his core, a nascent spark igniting behind his ribs, a flicker of hope born not of logic but of innate knowing. He turned to face her. "How do you know that? How could you possibly— Who are you?" Her face was one of serene understanding, devoid of arrogance or mystery. There was no further pronouncement, no celestial thunder, no lightning bolt of revelation, only her soft, unending gaze, fixed gently ahead, as if beholding a reality he could not access. Michael's voice faltered. Are you an angel?" He couldn't complete the question, for in her expression he saw Rachel. Not a physical resemblance, not the curve of her nose or the hue of her eyes, but a profound warmth, a sorrow carried with dignity, a spirit that seemed to absorb his grief without being diminished by it. And for the first time since Rachel's burial, Michael's eyes welled with unshed tears, but before another word could escape his lips, the woman in white gently closed her eyes. It was not a dramatic gesture, not a slow-motion descent, but a simple, graceful act. As her lashes lowered, a delicate fragrance permeated the cab. Lilies, fresh, exquisite, and sweet, as if a spring garden had inexplicably bloomed amidst the fog. Michael blinked through the blur. Then, she was gone. No sound marked her departure. No door opened, no burst of light flared. She was simply no longer there. In her place, resting on the passenger seat, lay a single white lily, still fresh, still radiating warmth. Michael remained motionless, one hand gripping the wheel, the other trembling as it reached for the flower. His fingertips grazed its petals. They were soft, cool, and undeniably real. In the ensuing silence, a profound certainty settled within him. She was not a dream, and neither were her words. "Your daughter will wake up," he whispered them, then again and again, until their impossibility yielded to an emergent truth. The truck sat immobile on the roadside, the engine humming softly, its exhaust curling into the crisp night air. Yet, within the cab, a profound stillness had descended, as if time itself had momentarily paused. Michael remained unmoving, the lily a cool, fragrant beacon of white against his hand. The woman in white, whatever her nature, had vanished without a trace, but the weight of her promise hung palpably in the atmosphere. "Your daughter will wake up." He stared ahead, his eyes unfocused, his breathing shallow. Somewhere deep within his chest, a dormant ember, extinguished years ago, flickered back to life, blazing anew. Then his phone rang. The jarring vibration on the dashboard shattered the tranquility like fragile glass. Michael started, nearly dropping the flower. He reached for the phone, its screen illuminating the darkness. "Calling St. Luke's Hospital." His heart plunged. For a fleeting moment, he couldn't breathe. His thumb hovered over the call icon, every imaginable horror of the past 6 days flooding his mind. What if this was the final confirmation of his worst fears? He answered, his voice cracking, brittle as dry leaves. "Hello?" A pause, filled with static. Then a voice. "Mr. Thompson?" It was Nurse Carter. He recognized the faint tremor in her voice. She had shown him kindness and patience through the long, despairing hours. "Yes, I'm here. Is something wrong?" "No," she replied quickly. "No, something has happened. You might want to sit down." He was already seated, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "Emily just woke up." Michael froze. "What? What did you say?" The nurse's voice began to shake as she explained. She opened her eyes about 5 minutes ago. She called for her mother. Then she said she was hungry and she smiled. Michael remained speechless, his mind struggling to process the words, like recalling a long-forgotten language. Her vitals are strong. She's alert. We're running more tests, but it's as if she just came back on her own. A silence followed on the line. "Mr. Thompson, are you still there?" Michael's eyes brimmed with tears. He attempted to respond, but only a choked sob escaped him. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice thick. I'm here." From the other end of the line, the faint, rhythmic beeping of monitors mingled with a soft voice, high-pitched, sleepy, and achingly familiar. "Daddy," Michael gasped. It was Emily, her voice clear, awake, alive. "Baby girl," he croaked. The nurse added gently, "She said that a lady in white sat beside her last night, that she sang to her, and that she smelled like flowers." Michael's hand trembled as he looked down at the lily resting on his lap. There was no need for further questions, no need for explanation. He knew with absolute certainty that she had been there, with him and with Emily. The woman in white, the mother of all mothers, the one who had heard the prayer he had barely dared to voice, and who had answered, not with thunder or spectacle, but with a whispered promise and a fragrant bloom. The morning light slowly crested the mountains, dissipating the fog as if drawing back a veil from the face of the earth. Michael Thompson had no recollection of the drive, no memory of the miles covered or the turns taken. His sole anchor was the tender sound of his daughter's voice calling his name through the phone. All else was instinct. He did not head towards Atlanta. He didn't even contact dispatch. Instead of the familiar highway, he navigated a route absent from his GPS, an old track etched into his mind from distant years. He journeyed through rolling hills, past sleepy agricultural villages and forgotten road markers, until a narrow, unpaved lane curved gently upward towards a modest elevation. Cresting the rise, enveloped by ancient oaks and a pervasive morning mist, stood St. Agnes Chapel. This was the very place his mother had brought him on countless Sunday mornings. It was here, a small and apprehensive boy, he had held her hand tightly as she offered hushed prayers from a pew that groaned under their combined weight. He remembered his first confession, the lighting of his inaugural candle, and the sound of his young voice joining in his first hymn. He had not returned for over 2 decades, not since his mother's funeral, not since he had abandoned prayer. Yet, as he brought his pickup truck to a halt beneath a gnarled sycamore, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years surfaced. He felt no apprehension about entering. The chapel appeared diminished by time. Its paint had weathered, and one of the stained glass panes bore a significant crack. Nevertheless, it remained, a silent, patient sentinel. Stepping from the cab, he still cradled the white lily. It was the same bloom, its petals still unblemished by time. Its delicate perfume lingered in the air, a persistent echo of recollection. Michael walked with unhurried steps toward the chapel's entrance. The wooden portal yielded with a customary creak, releasing an aroma of aged timber, melted beeswax, and an ineffable, sacred essence that embraced him like a long-cherished comfort. The interior was deserted, furnished only with rows of well-worn benches, a hymnal left open on the foremost seat, and a statue of the Virgin Mary at the front, her arms extended in welcome, her countenance serene, adorned in a robe of celestial blue. She appeared precisely as he recalled. He moved as if propelled by an instinct older than conscious thought, proceeding past the altar rail directly to the statue, where he paused. Then, he gently laid the lily at her feet. No words were necessary. She required no explanation, and he sought no absolution. This pilgrimage was not about formal devotion. It was a return to a fundamental sense of belonging. Michael settled onto the front pew, joined his hands, and bowed his head. He made no requests. He uttered no formal prayer. He simply drew a breath. And within that inhalation, in the profound quiet, a burden began to lift. Years of accumulated guilt, Unacknowledged grief and suppressed anger, buried beneath his career, his silence, and his unyielding resolve, dissolved. He was not entirely mended. He was not yet whole. But a transformation had occurred. The man who had entered was not the same man who now occupied this wooden bench. For now, he possessed a renewed conviction, not in absolute certainty or rigid doctrine, but in the boundless reach of mercy, the abundance of grace, and the enduring, tender affection of a mother whose presence had never truly departed, even during his estrangement. Michael Thompson did not return from his solitary mountain journey as a spiritual leader. He did not re-enter his community proclaiming miraculous events or documenting his experience in written accounts. He returned with a quietude mirroring the understated arrival of the spectral woman. Emily was already awake in her hospital bed when he entered her room later that afternoon. Her complexion had regained its natural color, and her eyes were bright and aware. She offered him a radiant smile upon seeing him. It was the very expression that had always weakened his resolve and tightened his throat. "Daddy," she murmured, extending her arms. Michael embraced her with a tenderness he had never before exhibited. No one could adequately explain the events that had transpired. Medical professionals meticulously reviewed every patient record, diagnostic image, and laboratory finding. All results were within the normal range. The situation defied logical explanation, all except for a discreet observation logged by a nurse. The patient reported dreaming of a woman in white singing a lullaby with no indication of delirium. Michael offered no correction, no speculative theory. He simply smiled and held his daughter's hand. A few days later, they were discharged and returned home. On the surface, the world remained unchanged. Their mortgage was still past due. The refrigerator continued its persistent hum. His aging freightliner still deposited oil stains in the same spot on their driveway. Yet, he himself was altered. Each morning before starting his engine, Michael would retrieve a small wooden container from his glove compartment. Within it rested the lily. It remained white, pristine, and inexplicably fresh. It had not yellowed, nor had its petals drooped. It continued to emanate a subtle, floral scent, seemingly untouched by the passage of time. Whenever he touched it, a comforting warmth would course through his body, akin to a gentle touch on his shoulders or whispered reassurance. "You are no longer alone." He shared the details of his mountain experience with very few individuals. He made a single attempt at a truck stop in Birmingham, nursing a mediocre cup of coffee while another driver recounted tales of spectral encounters. Michael divulged a fragment of his own experience, not the entirety, but just enough to open a dialogue. The other driver chuckled, remarking, "Sounds like exhaustion to me, Mike. Or perhaps too many roadside snacks." Michael managed a light-hearted chuckle in return, but inwardly a barrier was erected. He understood that extraordinary occurrences are precious, and such sanctity often diminishes in the clamor of everyday life. From that point forward, he spoke less but acted more. He began making stops at various churches during his extended hauls, sometimes simply to sit in quiet contemplation, other times to offer a prayer. He rejoined his local congregation, motivated not by obligation but by a deep yearning. He even volunteered his time, performing tasks such as sweeping floors, repairing faulty lighting, and distributing service bulletins. And he continued to drive. The same profession, the same hours, the same routes. But now, each journey felt imbued with a greater purpose. His truck transformed into a mobile sanctuary, and each rotation of the tires became a silent hymn. The rosary that Emily had placed in his glove compartment years prior now hung from the rearview mirror, swaying gently with every turn of the road. Fellow drivers started to notice his quiet demeanor. A few inquired about his practices. One even joined him in prayer during a lengthy drive to Texas. And occasionally, on nights with clear skies and deserted roads, Michael would lower his window just a fraction, allowing the wind to flow through. He would imagine it was her, the ethereal woman in white, the mother whose words were sparse but whose message had irrevocably changed his life. Faith did not alleviate the challenges in Michael's life, but it fortified him. He still contended with financial concerns, experienced mechanical setbacks, and faced difficult days. However, he now possessed something more profound: a core of stability, an inner compass, a constant, comforting presence. And every time he passed mile marker 107 in the Appalachian Mountains, he would instinctively slow his speed, extinguish the radio, allow his engine to hum softly, and whisper a word of gratitude. For he had discovered the divine not within the formal confines of a church pew, but in the profound solitude of a mountain road, in the enduring presence of a mother who had never forgotten him. Months elapsed. The seasons transitioned with gentle grace. Winter yielded to the arrival of spring. The pervasive sense of heaviness that had once shadowed Michael Thompson's existence gradually dissipated like morning mist before the sun. Yet, something enduring remained. It was something more profound than mere recollection, more potent than mere chance, quieter than any formal sermon. It was faith. Not the kind proclaimed with thunderous pronouncements or advertised with dazzling displays, but the intimate, resilient faith that resides in the most tranquil moments, in a person's quiet breath just before dawn, in a child's relieved laughter after recovering from illness, in the persistent, otherworldly fragrance of a single white lily that defied the laws of nature. Michael returned to his professional duties. The trucking routes remained consistent, and the pressing deadlines were unwavering. But he was fundamentally changed. Each morning, as Emily prepared for school, her eyes bright, her hair in a ponytail, her mind brimming with questions, Michael would pack her lunch and tie her shoelaces. Before stepping out the door, she would embrace him and softly whisper, "Drive safely, Daddy." She no longer spoke explicitly of the woman in white, but on one occasion, while engrossed in her drawing, Emily sketched a figure clad in a flowing white gown standing beside a radiant truck. "Who is that?" Michael inquired gently. She looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "I think that's the lady who sang to me at the hospital. She told me you were coming." She then turned the page and drew a rainbow, as if concluding the narrative. Michael, however, understood that this was merely the beginning. His wife's rosary continued to sway from the rearview mirror, and nestled within the glove compartment, still preserved within its soft wrapping, lay the lily. Its color had not faded, its form had not wilted, and it still retained its singular, gentle, floral, and otherworldly scent. Periodically, during the long nocturnal drives, Michael would reach out, place his fingers upon the container, and smile. He no longer sought overt signs or tangible proof, for what had been broken within him had been mended. The local community gradually noticed the change. The man who had once been reclusive now visited the diner every Thursday, purchasing breakfast for someone in need. The staff at the mechanic shop remarked on his increased laughter and the melodies he often whistled. A few old acquaintances, those who had witnessed the palpable grief in his eyes, discreetly inquired about the source of his transformation. He never divulged the complete account, opting instead to simply say, "I remembered how to believe again." Faith did not resolve his financial difficulties, nor did it erase his past losses, nor did it guarantee an easier path or brighter days. However, it provided him with a profound anchor, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, at a rest stop along Highway 55, a younger driver approached Michael and tapped his shoulder. "Excuse me," the man began. "Are you the individual who witnessed someone on that mountain road?" Michael paused, considering his response. He could have easily denied the encounter. Instead, he smiled, leaned back in his seat, and nodded slowly. The younger driver looked down, then asked, "Do you think she might return?" Michael did not hasten his reply. He cast his gaze out the window at the expansive blue sky and the way the wind rustled the treetops, creating a sound like hushed whispers. Then he responded, "She doesn't appear for everyone, but she hears everyone." He offered no further explanation. It was unnecessary. Sometimes, the most impactful narratives are those left for the listener to interpret. And so, life continued its course. The truck continued its journeys, the roads remained winding, and Emily continued to grow. But Michael's heart found a steady equilibrium. He was no longer a man overwhelmed by sorrow or running on empty. He was now a man held together by an intangible force, a force he could feel with every passing mile, every turn of the wheel, every whispered prayer he had once believed was lost. He knew differently now. No genuine prayer is ever truly forgotten. Had you encountered him on the road, you would likely have seen just another trucker, another large vehicle. But if you observed him closely, you might have discerned subtle indications. The deliberate manner in which he slowed as he approached mile marker 107. The habit of rolling down his window, the occasional glance towards the passenger seat as if expecting an occupant. And perhaps, just perhaps, you might have detected the faint, lingering scent of lilies. Because the most profound miracles do not always manifest as celestial fire. At times, they resemble a paternal figure embracing his child once more. Occasionally, they resonate as a whispered reassurance from the shadows, proclaiming, "She will stir." And then there are moments when they carry the fragrance of an eternal bloom. Should this narrative stir something within your core, if you have ever offered a silent plea, wrestled with uncertainty, or harbored hope in the stillness, understand this truth. You are never solitary. Heaven's response can sometimes be a gentle whisper. Subscribe to our platform for further authentic accounts of conviction, recovery, and subtle wonders. Share your thoughts in the comments section if you have ever encountered a moment that transcended the ordinary bounds of our existence. And kindly disseminate this narrative, for another soul may be awaiting a divine indication. This was Michael's personal journey, yet it is a path readily walked by anyone.